So, is this the end of civilization? A lot of people are talking about it, and a lot of people are saying maybe it is. Whatever about civilization, given what's going on in the financial world, you might think it's the end of the euro. Or maybe even before the 21st of December 2012. Or maybe it's just a new spiritual awakening. I wanted to show the movie to get you going, but I also wanted to make a small point. You know, when you read about this stuff, and I have, you'd be amazed how little data it's based upon. There is very little data remaining from the Mayan civilization. The Spanish conquistadores, the Catholic Church, the Jesuits, between them managed to basically eradicate the entire written output of the Mayan and the Aztec civilization. So what you saw, the basis and the basis of the thinking that 2012 is the end of the calendar is based on very little data. And yet, these last couple of years have felt, I think to most people in BI and to most people in general, that things are changing. 2011, 2012 have been difficult years financially. We really don't know what's going on in the business world. We don't know what's going to happen, I think, in terms of business intelligence, in terms of IT, in terms of what's going to change over the next few years. And I was here, well, I was actually in the museum conference center back in 2010, 2 years ago. And what I wanted to do was I just wanted to remind you a little bit of what I said to you back then. So once upon a time, I told you that we had a data warehouse architecture, a very old data warehouse architecture, an architecture that was conceived in the 80s and optimized for a single version of truth. How many of you believe in a single version of truth anymore? I think most of us have moved on. Most of us are thinking maybe it's not a single version of the truth, at least for everything. The business goals, which included reporting and human investigation and exploration of options, was done over a relaxed time frame. It was fine. We could do it over a coffee break. We could do it over hours. We could do it overnight. But over the years, that was no longer enough. We had the explosion of data warehouse components to address all of these needs for faster data, newer architecture, ways of working. We had the operational data store with data staging areas, independent data marts, operational data marts, bidirectional flows, federated access, you name it. We've had, well, something that is not so well architected anymore. And I also showed you in 2010 these 4 postulates. And I want to remind you about them. I actually want to pose you the question, looking at each of them. Do you still believe them? A postulate is something that we inherently believe. It's sort of embedded in our consciousness, and we don't think about whether it's true or not anymore. The first one says operational and informational environments should be separated for both technical and business reasons. Is that true anymore? Do you still think that's true? Operational BI says very differently. Operational BI and the things that drive operational BI says that first postulate, back from the 1970s, no longer makes sense. The second postulate from the 80s, which was the data warehouse is the only way to obtain a dependable and integrated view of the business, I would suggest to you that since then, ERP systems like SAP and so on have shown that it is very possible to get a reasonably well integrated view of the business in the operational sense. Back in the 80s, we said that the data warehouse is the only possible instantiation of the full enterprise data model. We've seen master data management come along since. We've seen all of that type of work going on in the semi-operational area, saying, you know what? Data warehouse is not the only place. And then a layered data warehouse, a postulate from the 90s, the early 90s particularly, a layered data warehouse is necessary for speedy and reliable query performance. analytic databases are saying something very different today. So all of these thoughts that we've had back then, and it was becoming clear in 2009, 2010, those thoughts are no longer valid. We need to look at them somewhat differently. And I proposed to you in 2010 that we needed a new architecture, which I was calling Business Integrated Insight, or BI to the power of 2, which covered all information and process, all of the people within the business. And that was a big step, that is a big step for people who do BI, because from your history and from your training, you think, I'm about supporting decision-making, typically by people who are sitting in front of tools like business objects or Cognos or whatever it is, and that's my audience. They're the people, the analysts, the reporting people that I need to support. And this architecture says something very different. This architecture says we need to have equal support across the different areas, operational, informational, and collaborative. So I'm not going to redo the presentation from 2010. I just wondered if you remembered what I said, if you remember that presentation, and if you didn't, maybe you remember this. Well, the guys here anyway. So the theme of that presentation was catching the next wave of BI. And we were playing with the theme, or I was playing with the theme of surfing. So moving on to 2012, I thought we might keep with the theme of surfing, at least a little bit for this picture. So what is new, given what's going on? What do we need to deal with? What do we need to make sure, what's coming up behind us? Is it a large shark, or is it something a little more friendly? I don't know about you, but I've heard a number of speakers over the last while talking about the death of the IT department, the outsourcing of IT, the replacement of IT by the cloud, and so on and so forth. And there's been a lot of predictions of the death of IT, and I don't really believe that. I'm not really a fan of that particular view of the world. I actually think that we're moving into a new era where you as IT folks, and I'm assuming that many of you are IT folks, there's probably a few business people in the audience as well, but be brave. We're not all that dangerous. This is moving into an era where business and IT really need to work together, to work collaboratively, to work in with a single vision of the future, which I call the BizTech ecosystem. I've been trying for a few years to get a book together, and this is now the current version of what's going on in the book is what you're seeing here. Most of the slides coming up are stuff that's in my mind and in the first version of this book, which is hopefully going to come out later this year. The BizTech ecosystem, which I would describe as a fully symbiotic existence of business and IT. A fully symbiotic relationship. Those of you who did biology know what symbiosis means. It means that two parties depend upon one another to survive, to grow, to exist. And I believe that rather than the death of the IT department over the coming years, what we're going to see is this merging of IT and business in a symbiotic